ladies and gentlemen, how are we all doing? Hope we're having a wonderful day. Today, let's talk about what is happening in the Premier League right now. So, as of recording this, it's Thursday, the 20th of January. 4 days ago, the North London derby, one of the biggest games of the season, was postponed due to Arsenal having a lack of players. Now, they listed this down to only having one COVID case, which was Martin Odegaard. They had 4 people away at the African Cup of Nations, and the rest of them were injured, apart from the fact that they loaned out Balogun, Maitland-Niles, and as it came out a few days later, they had sent Pablo Mari out on loan. Now, it begs the question as to, is this a manipulation of the rules? Now, if you go back years and years ago and stuff like that, when teams didn't have enough players to do it, they were either forced to play, obviously, with the youngsters, like the under-21s, or at the time under-23s, the youth teams and stuff like that, or they were told to forfeit the game for a 3-0 loss. With the exception of the COVID rules being introduced from last season, that if a number of clubs have, well, if a club has a number of COVID cases in their team that they cannot put out a full-strength squad, then the game can be postponed. And the problem is Liverpool abused this by claiming they had multiple cases and an outbreak had occurred, when it turned out there was several false positives and only one positive case. Now that, in hindsight, when you look at it now, is a manipulation of the rules, because they then played basically a weakened team against Shrewsbury a few days later in the FA Cup. Now, I understandably was with Arsenal fans on this because I feel that, Liverpool should have forfeited that game rather than postponed it. And Arsenal should have been given a 3-0 victory for it. Leicester, or Burnley, I can't remember which one it was and everything, then did the same and had their game cancelled over the weekend due to lack of players. Burnley, I think it was Burnley, since then cancelled their own game again on Tuesday night against Watford, again due to lack of players. But the big fallout from this was Arsenal's saying, you know what, no, we haven't got enough players for it. And rightfully so, it is erupted in the footballing world as what classifies as a postponement now. Years ago, if you didn't have the players and stuff like that, you used a youth team. That was the whole point. You look at teams that have done this season. So like Bayern Munich played a few days ago and stuff like that with a full bench. Not a single one of them had a Bundesliga appearance to their name. Leeds against West Ham, they had no right in winning that game. They won 3-2, a fabulous hat-trick from Jack Harrison. Their bench included a 15-year-old schoolboy. The only notable name on the Leeds bench was Rodrigo. The other 6 were either 19, 18, 17 or one 15-year-old. They fulfilled their 18-man quota. Man City against Chelsea had 4 teenagers on the bench. Yet Arsenal could not field a team, despite the fact they've got a very good academy. They've got a very good reserve side. But because it was the North London derby, they said they didn't have a strong enough team. Now, for me, that is too much of a manipulation of the rules, and it's caused the Premier League now to have a look at this postponement rule. If we look at this season, there has been over 22 games postponed due to COVID or for lack of players and stuff like that. I don't even think you've had 22 postponements since the beginning of the Premier League era back in the 1990s. The biggest example of this was, I think, the final game of the season in the 05-06 season. I probably get the season wrong and everything, but Tottenham and Arsenal were up for the 4th place and the last Champions League spot. Tottenham were playing West Ham. Arsenal, I can't remember who they played, doesn't really matter. But whoever won out of that, so if Tottenham won, they guaranteed top 4. Arsenal had to hope that Tottenham drew or lost to then they had to win to get the position. A few days beforehand, Tottenham were hit by what would eventually be known as Lasagna Gate, where food poisoning affected upwards of 10 first-team players. Now, if you look at that nowadays and stuff like that, 10 people from food poisoning, that would have been enough to postpone the game. But the Premier League refused to postpone the game due to the fact that it was the last game of the season and a result needed to be found. It would have been felt that Tottenham would have had an unfair advantage should they have postponed their game. If Arsenal had won, Tottenham then have to win their game. Arsenal rightfully would have felt, aggrieved by that if Tottenham had won. So we went out there with a less than full strength team. Now I'm going to see if I can find that team and just let's just see what team we fielded and stuff like that. Because if 10 first team players were out in this day and age, you would not play the game under the current COVID rules and stuff like that because of the amount of players that were gone. Because we lost 2-1 that day at Upton Park, which cost us the game and stuff like that. Michael Carrick and Robbie Keane had shaken off injuries and were due to play. They were fine. As Jermaine Gina says, lasagna and spaghetti bolognese were on the menu. We ate, and then in the middle of the night we started dropping like flies. Carrick and Keane were among the afflicted. So too were Edgar Davids, Aaron Lennon and Michael Dawson. The situation was so drastic that Spurs requested a postponement, only to be told that a failure to fulfil the fixture could lead to a points deduction. Joel had little choice but to field many of the players who had spent the previous evening and much of the morning being violently sick. So not only did we have to field a team of sick players and stuff like that, we were told that you would face a points deduction if you forfeited the game. That is absolutely incredible to even think. I can't even find the team on there, but we were forced to play a game because we were told that you would have had a points deduction, despite the fact there was an epidemic of food poisoning within the club and everything. Now, the Premier League only needs to have someone crying at the door saying we haven't got enough players, and then nothing gets done with it. Like I said, there's been 22 postponements this season. Burnley have played the least amount of games in the entire Premier League of just 17 at this point. Like Man City and Chelsea now have played 22. Tottenham played one of their 4 games in hand last night against Leicester, which is a video I'm going to make in a little while and stuff like that. We've still got 3 to make up. Now, 2 of them were due to a postponement. So one of them, obviously with the Brighton game, is we had the pandemic, we had to postpone it, fair enough. The Arsenal game, they postponed it because of lack of players, and the Burnley one because they didn't properly fix their undersoil heating and the snow wouldn't budge. That, in my opinion, is down to Burnley, not the Premier League or Tottenham, and rightly so, that game should have been given as a forfeit to Tottenham and a 3-0 win. Now we've got to keep rescheduling these fixtures and stuff like that. Tottenham have still got the FA Cup. Luckily, we're not in Europe anymore, but obviously, if you look at it, we were thrown out of Europe for the exact same reason Arsenal postponed the North London derby, with a lack of players due to COVID. Nothing to do with injuries and that. We just had a massive COVID pandemic outbreak, and we were kicked out of Europe for it. Where's the justice in that? But where do you reschedule these fixtures? Because we're all talking about player protection and the fact that we need players to have certain times off and everything, and then we're scheduling stupid international games. We now have to reschedule games like this so that there's 3 games in a week and stuff like that. Where's the player protection in that? With stupid reasons like that, the games need to have a clear reason to be postponed. The rule at the beginning of the season was if you had 6 or more players with COVID, you could postpone a game. And now it feels like that as long as you just claim that you haven't got enough players, which I think is ridiculous because the rules state you have a minimum of you have a 25-man team. You have a certain quota for for foreign players and homegrown players. Your youth players, your under 21s and stuff like that, do not count towards that quota unless you want them to. Therefore, that means that you can play as many under 21 players in a squad as whenever you want, right? And they don't have to be quote unquote registered for it. So how Arsenal pulled this off and everything is an absolute travesty, in my opinion. Arteta's now come out and say, no, we will not be attacked for this, but rightfully so. You cried foul when Liverpool did it to you. The Premier League fans, the fans of the Premier League, should be rightfully so. I mean, North London derby for Tottenham and Arsenal fans obviously is a special game and stuff like that. It might have lost its integrity over the last couple of seasons, but as a neutral fan and stuff like that, it's a good game to watch. It's a good battle and stuff. And when you cry foul, I haven't got a fit enough squad, I haven't got my best players and stuff like that, that ruins the integrity of not only the fixture, but everything as a whole. Because what you're saying is none of your players that were available and fit are good enough. And what does that tell your academy players, your reserve players that want to play for Arsenal? They're being told you're not good enough. Because you can't fill the boots of, say, a Saka, an Ødegaard, a Smith Rowe, a Martinelli, or an Aubameyang, you're not good enough for this club. Simple as that. And what do those young players then think? What, are they going to feel ever they're going to get a chance? No, of course they're not. You know, they've sent Balogun out on loan because he just wanted game time. They continued playing Eddie Nketiah as a young player and stuff like that. Some people pass the mark, but these kids and everything are now being told that you're just not good enough if you can't play in this game. You know, their youngster Charlie Patino and everything is meant to be their next big thing and stuff like that. Plays one game against Nottingham Forest in a shocking Arsenal team, and suddenly then, you know, he's not even going to be in contention for any game and stuff like that. He could have played in that midfield. At the end of the day, you can't use, as well, I have to add this in, you can't add the African Cup of Nations as a reason you don't have players. When you buy an African player, you know the rules, the fact that every other season they are going, if their nation goes to the African Cup of Nations, you lose that player. You have to adapt around that. If you buy an African player, realistically buy another player to back up from them or promote from within. You cannot use that as an excuse. The way I worded this on Twitter was that the Premier League now has as much integrity and consistency as the Conservative Party. With all that's going on in British politics right now, the Conservative Party are rock bottom in terms of we are screwed. And right now the Premier League is being overrun by people, and they're basically just putting them down to a point that they can get away with anything, and the Premier League are buckling. And that's why they're backtracking now and having to make another rule change for this. The people in charge of the Premier League should quite literally just state yes or no. And for me now, unless you have a certain amount of people out with COVID, you cannot postpone a game. I don't care if you've got to field 16, 18-year-olds and stuff like that. I don't care if there's got to be 15-year-old schoolboys on your bench and stuff like that. You have to fulfill your quota now for the rest of the season because we cannot keep postponing games. The fans are getting pissed off. The clubs are getting pissed off, and right now the Premier League needs to make a stand for it and stuff like that. I don't want to see any more postponements. I do not want to open my phone to a BBC notification or a Sky Sports notification saying that this game has been postponed due to lack of players. I'm done with it now. The Premier League needs to put their foot down and move on. Get through it now. Say to the clubs, if you're not going to fulfill it, you get a points deduction or you forfeit the game. Done. End of story. Run over. Let's end with the video and everything. Thank you so much for watching. If you watched this whole video and everything, leave a like and hit the subscribe button down below. Leave the comments on what stuff I should comment on in the videos. And I'll speak to you soon. Peace.